Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Willis. Today, on today's show, we'll talk about where Zach Evans sits on the pantheon of Ole Miss signees and where he ranks there. And what does he have to do after he gets here to climb that ladder of players that have performed in Ole Miss history. Also, we look at David Cutcliffe potentially going to the University of Texas as an analyst to live in Oxford and how that might affect the recruitment of Arch Manning. And should we care at all? And I will tell you what's going on with that. But this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Willis. Thank you very much for spending your Tuesday morning with me. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Do us a favor and hit subscribe, hit the bell, and also upvote the video. I would appreciate it indeed. Also, today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. Today's show, we're going to talk a lot about Zach Evans. And my theory on Zach Evans is Zach Evans is the most talented player to ever sign with the University of Mississippi at running back. He is the most talented running back to ever sign with the University of Mississippi. Now, if you go back and look at players that Ole Miss have signed over the years that are 5 stars, just look at the rankings that they were. Go back to Ronald McClendon in, I guess it was 2001 or 2002. I think it was 2002. Enrique Davis, Jerry and Ely. Those are the 5-star players that in the star era of Rivals and 247 and Scout and those people, those are the ones that signed with Ole Miss. So if you look at those rankings specifically, Enrique Davis, there's no doubt on that one. It was something that once he got to campus, holes emerged in his game. He turned into be more of a power threat. Honestly, if it was 1985, he would have been a fullback. Ronald McClendon and Jerry and Ely were essentially the same back. Ronald McClendon was a speed gut back. Goldie had the big run against Florida in 2003 that put the Gators away. Jerry and Ely has been a stalwart in the Ole Miss backfield the last couple of years. So the best running back signee-wise, and this is, of course, after the fact, when you just look at signees, out of those 3, Ronald McClendon, Enrique Davis, and Jerry and Ely is by far the best of the bunch. And we're talking about signing day things. So whenever in 1997, when Deuce McAllister and Joe Gunn signed, Joe Gunn was the most popular name on the signing list. Deuce McAllister was recruited to be a linebacker that they ended up moving to running back that turned out to have a very successful career, and he ended up being a first-round pick. He was in the same backfield with John Avery. John Avery was a junior college guy. We'll talk about him later. His numbers when he got there wasn't that, but he showed after the fact that he had something about him. And then there was Dexter McAllister, who was pretty electric in high school. Matt Lubick basically begged Ed Orgeron to sign him, but Dexter McAllister was absolutely electric. It's still one of the most fun highlight videos that I've ever had to put together, was looking at Dexter McAllister run the ball in high school and down in Largo, Florida. So those are just some players that come to mind on signing day that I'm paying somewhat close attention to, and then when I'm considering Zach Evans being the highest ranked, the most talented person to ever set foot on campus. Now, if you go back in time enough, I was a young guy. I was 6, 7 years old, so excuse me on this one. But I think Buford McGee would fit in this category as well. He was the one, whenever Ole Miss didn't get Marcus Dupree, Buford McGee kind of became the de facto guy in that era to sign up for Ole Miss. Now, he didn't do necessarily the same thing. And I think his first game, he ran for like 160 yards against Memphis or something like that. But he became a symbol. And he ended up playing football in the LA Rams, and he is probably the first running back that I can remember making good. And then you ended up with the situations on signing day. You had the Joe Mickles and Sean Sykes. You had Willie Goodlow. You had Corey Philpott, who was an excellent back. He's talk about a guy that made good coming down there. Randy Baldwin out of Griffin, Georgia. He was a guy that ended up going to the league for a little bit, having a cup of coffee there. But on signing day, it didn't really fit. So on signing day, the top players that are going to be recognized are probably, Zach Evans, who was a 5-star coming out of high school. Now, they might rate him as a 4-star now, but that is, you look at his high school highlights at TCU, and that just doesn't compute. He's rated as one of the top 10 running backs in college football at Ole Miss next year. This guy is legit. This guy is going to be the best player on offense. Now, think about how Lane Kiffin sets up his offense. Everything is going to go through Zach Evans. Now, they're going to put some big guys on the outside. You got the Malik Heath. You're going to recruit some more players, whether it be Deion Smith or Brew McCoy or whoever it might be on the outside transferring in. Ole Miss's wide receivers on the outside are about to look like they're known for. Since we started with Dante Moncrief back in the day, 10 years ago. That is what the typical Ole Miss wide receiver looks like. Last year was an aberration. Last year, because of the aberration, against Auburn, potentially, all of them were injured. Now, you can blame it on the strength coach, or you can blame it on the fact that the wide receivers were so little. You can blame it on the fact that Jonathan Mingo had bad luck. But it's important to realize that those guys were not able to be as, endurance friendly because they were so little. You had Braylon Sanders at 180 pounds, Shakur Pearson at 160 pounds. But those guys on the outside were not really expected to be great run blockers. Jerry and Ely struggled at times last year because the run blocking on the outside and downfield was suspect. Just was. Nothing against what's going on. They were great players for Ole Miss. But it's not the Ole Miss that we become accustomed to. And I think that Lane Kiffin is going to decide over the next few weeks and months to beef up the outside. Now, like I said, I love Braylon Brown. I've talked about that over and over and over again. I love Braylon Brown as a player. 2020, if they didn't shut it down because of COVID, he'd have a chance, a legitimate chance to be a 5-star. Everybody doesn't realize whenever you're a South Florida guy and you do your first camp and you show up to that, they don't take into account right off the bat how soggy the ground is you're running on. So every 40 time is going to be a little bit less. And as that factors in, as more camps happen and more stable ground happens, all of a sudden you see them elevate up the list. I think he's going to do that. And like I said, I think potentially Deion Smith, potentially Brew McCoy, they could be there. Today, just today, Casey Kelly was announced that he got a scholarship. Chad Kelly announced that on Twitter. So that affects the 85. Doesn't affect the 32. It affects the 85. 32 is the total number of players you could bring in as initials. That's the total number of transfers you can have. 85, the numbers all work out. Anytime a player transfers away, you can replace him with a transfer as long as you have an initial spot available. When we come back in just a little bit, we are going to talk about running backs that have made good. But first, the question of the day. And I want you to answer down below in the comments section or on Twitter. You can tweet me at @TheStephenWillis. Which running back do you consider the most talented running back to sign with Ole Miss? Again, which running back do you consider the most talented running back to sign with Ole Miss? Let me know. We can go back and forth and have a good time with that, but should be a lot of fun. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march to the playoffs, right to the big game this weekend. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, and along with live real-time updates of current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available in the 2022 season. Bet online, where the game starts. It's Super Week, brought to you by Get Upside, and there's no better place to get coverage of the big game than Locked On NFL Podcast. Locked On Bengals and Locked On Rams are in LA all week covering the big game. They're doing a heck of a job out there. Kind of been following on what's going on. They're doing interviews and stories and everything from Radio Row. Is kind of a cool deal. But as they get into town, they're going to ramp up. So they're doing a great job with that. So I do want to point out those earlier steps is why I think Zach Evans is the most talented player to come through Ole Miss, to sign with Ole Miss. Now we're going to discuss the best running backs that have played for Ole Miss. This is after the fact. This is the step that Zach Evans needs to make. He has a chance to walk out of here and own all the records running the football, especially with Lane Kiffin calling the plays. I expect the offense to absolutely run through him in the fall and play action and all of this stuff, but everything is going to start with Zach Evans. And I think Quinshon Judkins, he'll end up being the number 2 running back in the room. He'll have a kind of a Henry Parrish role with Kentrell Bullock, who's a great player as well, that will be the closer towards the end of the game. But that's what I expect with Zach Evans. So we're going to talk about who is he competing with? What do you need to know? Like Deuce McAllister, electric player. He rushed for 10,000 yards against Tennessee, against Lane Kiffin in 2009. Benjarvis Green Ellis went over 1,000 yards. I remember when I was at Ole Miss having to go through every game and mark every yard to try and find Benjarvis an extra yard to get him in that 1,000-yard season. This is back when they played 11 games a year, by the way. But this was designed to get him 1,000 yards. And by the way, we found the yard. And he was able to get his 1,000 yards. Brandon Bolden, also somebody that kind of falls between the cracks because of when he played. 2010, 2008, everybody's like, whoa, this guy is a great change of pace back. And after that, he still rushed for yards and still did great things. He's still in the league, by the way. Still getting carries with New England. He's having a fantastic career in the NFL. Probably greater than any other Ole Miss running back. The law firm was up there in New England with him as well, Benjarvis Green Ellis. Now, you look at Cut and Eli did not have a running back necessarily to speak of at the end of their reign. They had a trouble. At the beginning, they had Joe Gunn and Deuce McAllister in the Cut reign. And Deuce turned into a first-round pick. He was all kinds of development. It was one of those players that maybe didn't stand out what they were going to do at Morton. Everybody wanted to say, hey, Deuce, you're going to be a linebacker. He went to Ole Miss to try and play running back. Ole Miss tried him at running back, and the rest is history. He became the backup his first year, and then he starters the next couple of years. But a heck of a running back. Good career with the Saints, and before this year was the all-time leading rusher for the Saints. Very good career. He's probably the guy that Zach Evans is most going to have to compete with for legacy. That's just the way it works. Deuce McAllister will probably have to be the guy that Zach Evans has to compete with for legacy. Then if you look at John Avery Fast was the NCAA football, the Bill Walsh College football that was popping up on systems way back when. John Avery Fast became a thing because that dude could fly. I was actually in person in Vaught Hemingway Stadium when he had the 97-yard run against Arkansas. You could have driven a truck through this hole. And then once he got into the second level, he was gone. Just unbelievably blinding speed. But much like Deuce McAllister, he was more electric than he was all around and somebody that would be competing. But I did enjoy John Avery. He got drafted by the Dolphins out of college. But that Music City Bowl was kind of like, hey, Ole Miss is off of probation, and they're kind of back. And it was Deuce and Todd Wade, and Stuart Patridge, and John Avery, and Grant Hurd, and Eli Anding, the whole 9 yards in 97. And that started a run that if it wasn't for the bowls, like taking a 6-5 team over a 7-4 Ole Miss team, they would have had a bowl streak until 2003. So they would have gone on like a 7-year bowl run, but because that bowl kind of like didn't take care of them, all of a sudden you had to worry about that. So I think Zach Evans is the most talented player to sign with Ole Miss. He has some work to do to catch Deuce. He has to have one of those special years and potentially has to come back for his legacy. I told you in the Sugar Bowl, it's like, what is Matt Corral's legacy? Well, it depends on this game. Because Chad Kelly won the Sugar Bowl. Chad Kelly won 10 games in the Sugar Bowl. Matt Corral lost the game, ended up the same record with a Sugar Bowl loss. And that shouldn't go unnoticed. Chad Kelly belongs in that number 3 position behind the Mannings. The greatest of all time, Eli Manning, not close. It's not even a little bit close. Number 2 is Archie Manning, more of a social phenomenon than the actual numbers. He might have been special in 1969, but he's more of a social phenomenon whenever you look at quarterbacks now. And then you have Chad Kelly and then Matt Corral. That is the Mount Rushmore of Ole Miss quarterbacks. But I think Zach Evans has a chance to do pretty well. Like I said, he's the most talented player to come through here. And if he develops, if he has a good year, if Kiffin uses him the way that I think he is going to be used, with Jackson Dart and Michael Trigg, it's going to open up the offense pretty considerably. Zach Evans will be the key to this offense. So it's important that he is not just the most talented player to sign with Ole Miss, but he needs to start going up that chart of best all time fairly quickly. And if he does that, this offense has a chance to be really special. Question of the day, who do you consider to be a better signing than Zach Evans at running back at Ole Miss? That is the question of the day. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure the often pointless and seemingly intimidating questioning, is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand that their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. So you can save time and money when using Rock Auto. You can frequent a family business that Rock Auto is, serving do-it-yourselfers for more than 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They do that basically out of volume. And this volume of do-it-yourselfers, it's a pretty important thing. So go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution for your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all of the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Yeah, definitely take advantage of that. I know the parts store and everything, shopping in the store can be a little bit hectic. If you have a little bit of time, it's not an emergency, give those guys a look up. They'll be able to hook you up indeed. We've gone through Zach Evans and where he sits as one of the best possibly to ever sign with Ole Miss as far as ratings and recruiting. And we went in the second segment of what he had to do to climb up that ladder and why that's important. So that is the 22 part of this class. Now, let's move on to 2023 real quick. Now, the rumor came out, there was a tweet that Texas was about to hire David Cutcliffe to be an analyst at Texas. And everybody is freaking out because of Peyton and Eli and Archie and all of this. Get that. That's fine. David Cutcliffe brought me on his staff in 2004. I went through there and Ed Orgeron. That was my Ole Miss experience working in that building. And then from there, I went to Rivals.com for about a decade. Now, I said that just to let you know that I am a huge David Cutcliffe fan, and I would run through a wall for him if I needed to. Fantastic guy. Honestly, great man. Period. Now, I say that to say this. This is a desperate act by a team that was fading fast in the 4th position to try and become relevant again. This is a Hail Mary. It shouldn't be seen as anything other than a Hail Mary. First of all, Cooper Manning is close with Eli, Peyton, and Archie. During that same time, Cooper Manning wasn't exactly living at home. It's not like they were recruiting the same time. I would not overly worry about what was going on. If this was Peyton, yes, I'd give credence to it. If this was even Eli, I would give credence to it. I give less credence to it to Cooper, and this is why. Cooper Manning was supposed to play football at Ole Miss. Through spinal stenosis, he was unable to do that. Watch Book of Manning if you want to see exactly what happened. So, the unfinished business and the legacy between Cooper and Arch Manning is a dream unfulfilled by Cooper. It isn't the legacy of Eli. It isn't the legacy of Archie. It's the fact that Cooper didn't get to do what he loved. Get to do what he thought he was promised. And whenever he left, he also talked about how players and upperclassmen treated them really well. Now, we all know that Ole Miss can be filled with great people. And that is the going away thing that Cooper Manning was reminded of. Now, Cooper Manning probably went to games and saw Peyton play. He went to games and saw Eli play. He probably met David Cutcliffe in passing more than a few times. But it's not a situation where the relationship was as close as it was to Peyton and Eli. And to assume that Peyton and Eli, and even Archie for that matter, is going to have influence on Archie's college decision is laughable. This is going to be a Cooper Manning decision with his son Arch Manning, with his, I don't know his mom's name, but she'll be in it as well. If he signs with Ole Miss, fantastic. If he doesn't, that's good too. The kid needs to go where he wants to go. And there is a group of people, and I think this is the detriment of the recruiting cycle for Ole Miss. They're pinning a savior complex on him. And I just don't think that works. I think that's a surefire way to lose him. You know, whenever you squeeze something real tight and it ends up killing what you're holding, or you can't quite hold it because you're holding it, you're gripping it too tight, or like when you're playing baseball and you're not exactly in there because you're gripping the bat too hard. You just need to relax and let it happen. He's not a savior. He's a good quarterback. He's a highly rated prospect. There's no guarantee that he'll be any better than what Matt Corral was, what Chad Kelly was. Definitely not a savior. Now, does he have tools, elite tools? Absolutely. And knowing that, he should be recruited, and he should be recruited heavily, which he is. But going out and trying to get analysts in there is almost like a desperate move to try and get back in the game. I would not worry about David Cutcliffe going to Texas, because Texas has been fading for months. This has been for 3 or 4 months an Ole Miss, Alabama, and Georgia battle. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be an Ole Miss and Georgia battle. And then it'll be Matt Luke trying to wreak his revenge on Ole Miss. But he's a really good player. I'm not saying he's not a good player. I'm saying that some people are viewing his recruitment wrong and how it should be handled. Lane Kiffin is doing this exactly correctly. And he's recruiting highly recruited backup quarterbacks in case Arch falls through. I mean, this is a big-time moment for the Ole Miss program, but it's not that big. It's honestly the same as it was when Shea Patterson signed with Ole Miss. It's the same as it was when Matt Corral signed with Ole Miss. It's the same as it was when Eli signed with Ole Miss. It was big moments, yes. But they're big moments that can happen over and over, and it doesn't have to have that surname to be the moment you want. Like I said, Arch Manning is a fantastic quarterback. Yes, he should be recruited. He should be recruited hard. People that have a savior complex with him, they're doing this wrong. They don't understand it. They're just doing it because of the last name and the feeling that Archie and Eli gave them. Not anything to do with what Arch can do. Recruit this the right way. Don't overly special do it. And if you do that, you'll have a better chance of landing him than if you do the savior complex thing. That's just my opinion. So, all right. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit the bell and upvote the video. Tomorrow we will continue going on with news of the day and recruiting. I think there's a basketball game as well. I think Ole Miss plays Alabama. No, I think that's tonight. So tomorrow night we might talk about that. We might leave it for the post-game pod. Now make the second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Doing a great job. We are building fantastic. 1 month, the first month that this show was a thing, 400 subscriptions on YouTube. Absolutely unbelievable. We'll keep trying to build it up. Coming up in the next few days to week, baseball preview. We're going to get into baseball. We have a baseball guy. We're going to release that whenever we get it recorded, if everything works out. And we're going to talk about baseball because that's getting ready to start, because I believe that is next weekend. And we're going to do post-game pods for those. So awesome. So we're going to have a lot of fun doing all that. But until then, until tomorrow, I hope everybody has a good day and hotty toddy.